Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Whitney, and thank you for coming to today's author talk, hosted by Cup of Tea with That Book, Please, a blog website full of book reviews and recommendations, related news reports, original writing, and of course, tea. My name is Whitney, and I'm here with Tabrisha Jones, creator of Cup of Tea with That Book, Please. And we will be in conversation with our special guest, Sarah Raughley, author of The Queen's Spade. We want to give a big thank you to all attendees. You could be doing a number of things right now, but you're here with us today for this virtual author event. We welcome folks of all ages, teens, adults, and educators alike, to today's exciting and compelling conversation. And after our discussion, there will be some time for Q&A. I will be monitoring the chat, so if you have any questions that come up during this conversation, please post it into our Q&A box, which I will tell you more about in the next slide. And we will, of course, do our best to get to all of your questions. Any links and resources shared during this presentation will be shared with attendees and on the blog. And lastly, please be respectful to all attendees and panelists. So before we get started, I do want to go over some housekeeping rules for those that are not familiar with Zoom. Firstly, just want to mention, please keep yourself muted when you are not speaking. We greatly appreciate it. And I do want to take a couple, hopefully not a couple minutes, but to kind of go over some Zoom features for those that are not familiar. At the bottom, you can mute and unmute yourself. You can showing your camera is totally optional, but you will always see Tabrisha, mine, and Sarah's wonderful faces. Again, we love to see our attendees be active in the chat, so please utilize that for any comments, questions, accolades. We are recording this, but either of you are not. And if you just want to give some props, you can always click on the reactions icon, which is the emoji smiley face. And for whatever reason, if you are having trouble following along with what we're saying today, there is live transcript or live closed captioning, which is the CC in the box. And if you need to leave the talk early, reminder, this is being recorded and no need to say anything, but we do love when people say goodbye to us. But if you do it by accident, you can have no trouble coming back in. So please familiarize yourself with some of these features while we talk to you about some amazing things happening at the blog. So, if you're a fan of books, pop culture, and the power of friendship, check out Fake Book Club podcasts, wherever it is you listen to your podcasts. Our first season is already out. We talk about our favorite reading trackers, horrorable or horror books, nostalgia, and my personal favorite, K-pop. Plenty of time to catch up before the premiere of our season 2, and tell all your friends. And I will drop a link to that in the chat momentarily. Next slide. Wonderful. And if you're interested in being published, check out Library Zine, Voices Across New York City. It's an all ages literary magazine containing original writing and visual art submitted by library patrons across New York and beyond. There is no fee to submit, and you can submit up to 5 works. You can visit our website, bit.ly/libraryzine, capital L, capital Z, to learn more and read past issues. We are currently up to our 9th or 8th. So without further ado, I will now pass it on to Tabrisha to introduce our featured author. So without further ado, take it away, Tabrisha.
Thanks, Whitney, and hi, everyone. My name is Tabrisha, and yes, I am the creator of the blog Cup of Tea with That Book, Please, which is in its 10th year. So this is a great way to celebrate 10 years of the blog. And I'm happy to introduce our first author for the new year and also for the blog, Sarah Raughley, who has a book coming out Tuesday, actually, The Queen Spade. So thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us this afternoon. Yay, there's the cover. I love the cover. It
Thanks
is
for
awesome.
having me.
Yeah, I love the cover so much. You're welcome. So, before we get into our amazing conversation, let me give you a short bio of Sarah. So, Sarah Raleigh is a Nigerian Canadian author of the Effigy series and the Bones of Ruin trilogy. A finalist of the Aurora Award, Raleigh is also an English professor and public intellectual who has written for journals such as The Walrus, CBC, and Teen Vogue. Her creative work is inspired by a messy confluence of experiences from being a huge fangirly blurred to being a post-colonial researcher and academic. You can find out more about her work at her website, sarahrawley.com. So thank you again so much, Sarah, for joining us.
Thanks for having me again.
You're welcome. And so we are here to celebrate the upcoming release of The Queen Spade. So for those who have not had a chance to read The Queen Spade, could you tell us a little bit about the book?
Well, here's the cover again. If anybody can see it, it's all pretty. I love it. And you can see the back here. I love the colors of like the yellow, the black, the red. It's beautiful. And the Queen Spade is really like a revenge thriller, a historical revenge thriller. So if you're interested in 19th century historical kind of books and Bridgerton, it's very much like if Queen Charlotte was, seeking revenge against the royals. Um, I don't know if anybody knows about Queen Victoria in the 19th century, the Queen of England, but she actually had a daughter, an African daughter, an African goddaughter that she adopted, who was an African princess from, the West Africa, specifically like Yoruba, Igbo clan. And she Sarah Forbes Spinetta, her original name is Umoba Aina, was given to Queen Victoria as a gift, kind of like propped up as propaganda for Britain's multicultural, spiel, like their image as a multicultural empire at the time. So here, Sarah Forbes Spinetta is not just happy to assimilate into the British elite, she actually wants to take down the British elite for what she sees as like perceived wrongs. So it's very Count of Monte Cristo type of thing.
So I've read a couple of biographies of Queen Victoria and I've seen like movies and documentaries. I didn't know that she had an African goddaughter, and I think not only it was your book, but I don't know if you recognize the book. It was by Walter Dean Myers because I remember seeing it in the library that he wrote about Sarah as well, and that also piqued my interest. But I want to learn further more about her ever since reading The Queen's Spade because it is just to have like what you were saying, like the Queen Victoria like had a goddaughter, just not because it's like how how and you touched base on it in the book. It's like, oh, it's to make it look like, oh, we saved her from like these terrorists, but it wasn't really like it was like a hidden agenda for them. And so I just want to hear more of her take and her story. And I think you with the Queen Spade, you gave her a voice in that sense and put it in a connecting story and like an engaging story. And I completely agree with like you saying like the Count of Monte Cristo meets
Yeah.
I would say Bridgerton. I was thinking Downton Abbey, but I
Yeah.
can see Bridgerton too.
I really only like talk about Bridgerton because it's so like it's kind of like Shonda took a very colorblind approach to it, which is I
Hmm.
thought was very interesting. So you have a lot of like people of color and especially like BIPOC women that are sort of getting into that sort of historical era, even though that era is sort of like pre-Victorian era, but still like I have my thoughts about Bridgerton, positive and negative. I think it's a
Hmm.
really great show. But I also have recognized that through Bridgerton, a lot of people who are a lot of women, a lot of Black women, a lot of BIPOC women who are interested in historical narratives are being seen now. So I think that's really special.
Yeah, and definitely because I am a big Jane Austen fan, and I'm not naive in the sense like all even though I love most of the Jane Austen adaptations, they are all of white people. And I know for a fact that that is not the case during in Regency times. There were people of color during those times. There was just not, you don't see it as much. And while I was reading The Queen's Spade, and I did want to, before I get to that, I did want to ask you this because you did, so because maybe this will be a perfect segue into it. So you took a real historical figure and gave her a voice. I was wondering if there was another historical figure, if you had the chance to retell their story in like in either if it's in a revenge thriller or just just like a very straightforward forward historical perspective. Is there someone that you would like to put in a different light?
I mean, I think it would be interesting to do Sarah Bartman, who was called the Hottentot Venus in the early 19th century. In the early, around 1830, she was sort of fooled into coming to England under false pretenses as a woman in the south of Africa and put in these human zoos, which I do talk about human zoos and that kind of thing that was happening at that time in my other series, The Bones of Ruin, which is like a historical fantasy trilogy. But yeah, Sarah was kind of put in a circus, in a freak show in Piccadilly, London, and sort of paraded across Europe simply for being a Black woman. And there have been some short stories that have given her a voice, but I think like if I were to do somebody next, I would definitely like go through her story because she ended up dying, I think, of tuberculosis in Europe, in France. And even after she died, she like her body was dissected and placed in a museum. So her bones were like they didn't get to repatriate her bones back to South Africa until like I think the 80s or 90s, which is wild. It's very recent, right?
Yeah.
So definitely I think I would try Sarah Bartman. Oh, would
Yeah.
the book be YA or adults? That really depends on a lot of things. It's such a sad story. I think it would be hard to do it as YA. And even, the Queen Spade is sort of billed as a YA adult crossover because the themes are so tough to deal with.
But it because I did want to ask, like, did you attend for it to be a YA or adult? Because as a librarian, we have like different criterias, like what is considered to be YA and what's adult. And most of the time, it is because the protagonist is a teenager, and that's
Mhm.
like the basis of it. It's like if a protagonist is a teenager, then it's considered to be YA. But there are some adult books with the protagonist as a teenager, but it does deal with adult themes. So I don't know if you meant it for it to be that way, or were you told this would be better if it was published or promoted as a young adult novel?
We actually went back and forth a lot. I started it off actually as a short story, and then my agent actually talked to me about potentially making it adult. And I was thinking of crossing over into adults as well. The thing is, like, historically wise, Sarah Forbes Bonetta was 1819 anyways, around the time that these events occur. So it would make sense to have it be, despite how um, I think just like despite how strong and mature I think some of the themes are, it makes sense to have it be YA. So I tried it as adult and then tried it as YA, and I thought, like, okay, I think the voice works here. I
Mhm.
think the voice works in terms of like who she is, because you know there are other books as well that star 18, characters who are 18, 19 years old and are in the Victorian period. And of course, back then, women were like even younger than that, were expected to get married and all of these things. So I think it I think it makes sense to have the story of Sarah Forbes Bonetta as an 18, 19-year-old told in YA in the 19th century, so that people reading it today and youths reading it today can sort of see how their 19th century counterparts had to live, right? Like all these adult things, like this is, forced marriages and stuff like that.
Mhm.
That was normal for an 18, 19-year-old.
And also, and I do agree because I think even though as an adult reading this, I and working with teens, I feel like even though a lot of the things like you were saying, like forced marriage and having their life planned out for them, even though this happened over 200 years, the same kind of themes still aligned with 2025. You still have teens, they feel like my life is already planned out for me, or I'm trying to find my voice and trying to make my own path. And even though different time periods, it's still similar. So a lot of young readers would identify with Sarah, maybe not with the same circumstances, but with the similar feelings. And that's what I really liked about it, because I was like, even though I thought Sarah was a badass, I feel like I'm jealous of Sarah's, like I would not been able to do all the things you're doing in this book. But you can empathize with her and feel her frustration and rage. You feel the rage, and it sometimes it's like, and you're feeling like maybe pull back, but it's like no, she has a right to be angry. And I just love how that was like portrayed in the Queen's Spade. And I wondered, like, how did you, like, what was your inspiration? It's probably ridiculous to think of, to ask this question because of what just happened, and you're trying to forget what happened in 2024. I know I do, but I'm going to ask anyway. What was your inspiration for writing The Queen's Spade? Like the story and the of all the rage and all that frustration that was put into this book.
Well, my inspiration, I mean, I wrote the story back in like 2023, I think. So, I mean, I didn't know what was about to happen in 2024. But it's so interesting, like if we're going to be real about like Trump's election and the fact that by far the people who voted the most against Trump, and I say voting against Trump because I think there are a lot of people who say things like, well, Kamala Harris had her own problems and she was for this and she was for that. And they weren't necessarily, she wasn't necessarily a good person either. And it's like, it was Black women, it was African American women who understood what was at stake the most. And that is why 92% of Black women voted against Trump, because they knew that if Trump were to get into office, it would mean, you know, a lot of terrible things for a lot of terrible people across the world. Whereas with a democratic, presidential office, Senate and Congress, there was perhaps some room for hope, right? It's not about like good versus evil. The Democrats aren't perfect, blah, blah, blah. Like we live in a plutocracy. We know that. But by far and large, it was Black women that understood that if we're going to make this world a better place, not just for Americans, not just for people, across the country in the Americas, Canada, and so on and so forth, but across the world, in the Middle East, in Asia, et cetera, Trump cannot get into office. And so I think there was a feeling of betrayal that occurred when Trump got elected and we saw those demographics, 50% of white women, 50%, like more than 50% of white men, I think, like, and other minority communities as well, didn't vote, or voted for Trump. And I think for us, a lot of Black women felt a lot of rage and were told not to. And I think like even now it worries me to say these things because I know like a lot of people will say, well, no, you can't think that way, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Black women were angry. Black women were angry, and we're often told not to be angry. We're told to give our services to activist causes while denying our own emotions and setting our own emotions aside for the sake of other people and for the sake of, these other movements. But if we express anger or betrayal or any of those things, we can very easily be seen as the angry Black woman. And I think The Queen's Spade for me was a book where I wanted to make it clear that being angry as a Black woman was perfectly fine. Expressing your feelings about the subject, even if it's not acceptable, in a larger sort of progressive space and discussions and mainstream discussions, is okay. That as a Black woman, you have every right to be upset. You have every right, because we have a lot of things to be angry about. And so if you want to be angry, go ahead and be angry unabashedly so. If you want to protect your peace, go ahead and protect your peace. If you want to seek revenge, seek revenge. Because we've been controlled too much by too many different people on the right and on the left, and within our own communities. I think Black women need to feel free to feel what we feel.
And there's like that particular scene with Sarah, when she's with is it Rue? It's Rui. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Rui, yes, yeah.
Rui, yes. Um, where and they're like in this brawl and fight, and I think it was like at that point when Queen Victoria told her that she's arranged a marriage for her. I think she felt like she was gonna give up, but then all this rage went, not to like give any spoilers because it's an amazing scene, like all the rage just like built up, and she, let's just simply say, knock someone out for a good 5 minutes and go for there. Um, and you can feel like her frustration and rage. She's like, I'm not gonna back down. Like this is it. Like no, no, no. I'm If this is gonna happen, I'm gonna give like a last hurrah and just like go out fighting.
Yeah.
And you like all what you just said is like, yeah, that's what Black women have felt and continue to feel, that we just feel like we're not going to give up. We're going to continue fighting. Like this was just one setback of many that we've dealt with, and we're just going to keep and getting up and get on fighting. And I think that's like this book is so great. It came at a perfect time. I don't think the publisher knew that it was going to have. They just picked a date out of nowhere, but it came at a perfect time because it just really is a perfect portrayal of that Black women rage, and you don't, and also is like unique, even though it's like a retelling of a real historical figure. You don't
Mhm.
see a lot of books like that, like with that perfectly depict Black women rage, and I think this is just like one of them that just does it so amazingly well.
Thank you. It's so interesting because when around the time that the book was sold to Harper, um it was actually like we were actually thinking about Queen Elizabeth II's death.
Mhm.
Is it Queen Elizabeth II or the first? I can't remember. It's probably the
No, the
second.
second, yeah, the second.
Yeah. Um, and just like the discourse surrounding it, right? And British imperialism, and do people have a right to not mourn her
Mhm.
death? And especially like people who are descendant of the, those who were colonized by Britain, and et cetera, et cetera. And we thought like, oh, this is kind of timely, especially and also with the ongoing discussions of the place of Meghan Markle in the royal family, and that's
Mhm.
just bubbled up again. So and now with this election and the inauguration happening in basically a week and all these things, like I do think that this is really a weirdly perfectly timed book. Like if anybody is feeling upset on, the week of January 21st, like just read this book.
Yeah, it's been a perfect like break for me because I'm already trying to figure out what to do because it sucks because we can't even go to work that day because not because we get inauguration day off, because ironically, which is a sad irony, it lands on Martin Luther King Day, and that's a federal holiday. So we're
Oh
all,
dear.
well, yeah, so we're like, what are we gonna do? I don't want to be in my house.
I mean, I think like how can we use this as, a time and space for resistance? Um, and sometimes resistance is keeping your peace. Like maybe you mentioned K-pop. I don't know if you're a K-pop fan. Like maybe you just want to be watching K-pop videos and
Whitney, do
just
you want
like,
to take this one?
I'm a huge K-pop
So,
fan. I could wax poetic about K-pop because I know it's like problematic in a lot of ways as it borrows from well, not borrows, it's straight up jacks a lot of like hard
I know.
like hip hop and R&B is what the new era, the current era of K-pop is right now, which is why it's kind of blown
Mhm.
up globally since the pandemic. But
Yeah.
I I like it because who like the my era of R&B is what the music is what K-pop is making now. And so that's kind of why I kind of fell back into it. But long story short, yes, I listen to K-pop all day, every
I don't
day.
think
So
I
so
feel like people should be allowed to like what they like, you
yes,
know,
I agree.
while
I
understanding like there's nothing that I feel like what can we watch that isn't problematic in some way as Black
exactly.
people? You know what I mean? Like if I sit down and if I try and erase like all these and that might even be like going back to Harlem Renaissance, right? African American writers and being like, oh, like this is low-key sexist against Black women, like certain
Oh yeah.
certain authors, right? Certain male
Mhm.
authors, for example, and various things like there's always going to be something, but I would say as a Black woman sometimes just having the freedom to enjoy what you enjoy and just giving yourself that time and space to say, you know what, I'm disengaging from this nonsense for now. Like, I'm going to think about what to do and strategize, but ultimately, I've got to focus on myself. And if that means watching, I don't know who the Um, I used to be a big K-pop fan. I'm not like super into it now. So like I don't know like who's big 100% right now in terms of like fifth
Oh
generation.
my God. The fact that you know what generation we're in just tells me all I need to know.
Yeah, I know. I used to be a huge fangirl. and struggle with that. But it's like, hey, if you want to sit down and listen to like Shiny or
Oh
something,
my God,
go
shiny.
for it. Go for it.
Are you, I realized I was gonna ask you, and I know we're getting off track. But then I remembered you're in Canada. I was like, are you
Yeah.
seeing Taemin? But
Oh my God. I find it so difficult to get tickets these days. And some people aren't even like coming to Canada, or like they're coming to Canada and the concert's getting canceled. Like I wasn't able to get Kiss of Life concerts. I think it was Kiss of Life.
yeah,
And but that Toronto concert got canceled somehow. And I was like, I think that was the second K-pop concert in Toronto that got canceled. And we're like, why is Toronto cursed? What's going on?
and this is why I love, not to rub it in, but it's like it's hard for me as a not just a K-pop person, but anyone that living in New York City, just we're so spoiled when it comes to just entertainment of all types. And we're all 9 times out of 10, we're always gonna get a concert of like everyone comes here. Like there's
Yeah.
always major events happening, both good
Mhm.
and bad. Um, so I feel bad for, but I'm currently across the pond, across the lake from Toronto. And it yeah, it's dead up here. So I definitely feel the entertainment isolation of not much going on. But again, it just kind of goes back to like building your own community and kind of starting
Mhm.
things that you
Yeah.
do want to see.
Mhm.
Because it just starts with one person and like one is like one do nothing group or one just like Tabrij and I this talk right now is has evolved from our book club, which has also become a podcast in a way.
Mhm.
Um, so it's just hoping to get this back on track because again, I could talk about K-pop and everything forever and a day, but it's just more like building as Black women or like just building your own community and being an example of what you want to see and do in that community is always how things get better. And I think culturally, like we do a lot. We try to save people in the culture, and again with like the voting, but we have to kind of step back. Like we are in like the like I'm helping out like my community being like Black women, they need it, they got it, but everyone else, I'm just like you gotta figure it out. Like I don't have the mental uh capacity to kind of culturally think about others, especially because not only do we deal with anti-Blackness, but and anti-Blackness is global. Like colorism, anti-Blackness, white supremacy is global. And but so is like misogynoir, however you pronounce it. And that's goes hand in hand. And that's even deeper within our community that isn't necessarily addressed. And again, it's a conversation for another talk because I do want to get back to the reason why we're here. But I'll finish with saying like building your community, and this is kind of what we're doing with this talk,
Mhm.
is pretty important, and having this conversation, which hopefully more people will watch this and spread the word, you'll spread the word, but kind of just raise more awareness with this and knowing that there are people out there that us specifically who are there for each other and for this sense of community, especially in the literary space, which is very heavy in the lack of diversity, for lack of better
Mhm.
reason.
Well, I think that's why, I mean, I can bring it back to, Queen Spade and say, I'm a Black Canadian, Nigerian, you know, who is writing about a Black British woman in the 19th century. The book was published by an American publisher and is, and you guys are Black women in America who are talking to me about it. Like you mentioned, Blackness and misogynoir are global. So we can make those different connections instead of being mired and myopic in our own little like corners and saying, no, I'm American and that's it. Or I'm Canadian. Like what you guys are going through in America, I couldn't vote. You know what I mean? If I could have voted, if I was an American citizen, I would have been part of that 92%. But I was here hoping and praying, and I felt the anger and feelings of betrayal, the 92%, when that outcome happened. And I just think that we shouldn't be afraid to build community diasporically and to understand like Blackness as global, to come together and support each other in terms of literature as well, because great work is being done in America by Black women writers. Great work is being done in the Caribbean. Great work is being done in Africa, on the continent, across the continent, and in Canada, and so on and so forth. So, let's come together and build a strong community of support because we're gonna need it. We're gonna need it.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great way like to segue to like my next questions, like because even after the election, we saw, and this tends to happen, which also kind of frustrates me, that when it's against like I don't want to say like the liberal idea, but against what is the accepted idea, like what happened with George Floyd when there was like a huge uptick. It's like, oh, let's make sure to like have anti-racism book lists and support Black authors, and of course there was an uptick, then it went down because it
Mm.
wasn't a trend. It seems like supporting Black authors is a trend to some people, to especially the publishing industry. And I think I wanted to ask, like, what kind of changes that need to, what ideas, like you say, like that need to happen within the publishing industry, so to make sure that this kind of thing of creating a community, supporting Black authors 365 days in a year is not a trend. It's something that should be done every single day.
Yeah, I wrote a piece about this very Canadian publication called The Walrus, which talks about how the sales of my books, the effigy series, which is kind of like Sailor Moon, diverse Sailor Moon in a way, is a lot of fun. And the sales of that book actually had an uptick. It skyrocketed during the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020 in the wake of George Floyd. And I was talking about how that made me feel and the psychological impact of knowing that it took a man's death, brutalization and death for this to happen. And I think that, you know, the problem is that when in the mainstream is still largely, conservative, it's still largely white, patriarchal, capitalist, etc. And so the whims of that sort of dominant mainstream community often dictates whether diversity is something that's going to be accepted. And so I think we as Black writers need to support each other. That's the big authors who've already made it and have their seat at the table, and also like the little authors who are just coming up, or the mid-list authors. We need to support each other in order to create a community of our own readership instead of constantly, begging for that sort of white acceptance, if that makes sense. Like constantly begging for, again, to be the only Black person at the table. Sometimes authors do that. Um, like it's like, well, I've made it. So once I've made it, I don't really care about you. I'll burn the bridge behind me. But there also needs to be a stronger idea. First of all, there needs to be more diversity behind the scenes as well. when it comes to traditional publishing and indie publishing. So, who are the gatekeepers? Who are the people at the top? Who are the people that are, giving the go ahead as to what can be published and what can't be published, and how much marketing resources we're going to give to certain books, and the librarians and the booksellers. If there's no diversity there, then we're going to continue to see, white authors, cisgendered authors, straight authors, able-bodied authors, et cetera, being privileged over the marginalized. But we also need to expand our understanding of how we can get our stories out there, right? Like, there are so many ways in which we can get our stories out there through trade publishing, indie publishing, self-publishing, and self-publishing can take many different forms. So are we creating our own platforms? Are we supporting Black-owned platforms? Are we supporting Black bloggers, Black influencers, Black podcasts, Black bookstores, and so on and so forth? So I think all of that is really important to make sure that, you know, Black books and BIPOC books and diverse, marginalized, books from marginalized voices don't suddenly disappear because it's not a trend anymore.
No, yeah, and I completely agree. And then also, like, as someone who's a Black book blogger, it is harder for me to like you, especially like on social media, because it's not something because of the weird algorithm or something like with Bluesky, which is becoming more it is like a community, but also because it is now trending because it's seen as the alternative to X and now
Mm,
Threads.
yeah.
And I'm afraid like yes, you can have a lot of followers, but it's just like back to that point. It's like you're just it's clickbait in the sense like you're just clicking in the sense like it's because it's just there and you're following this person because you just want to see like you're being perceived as being on the left or any in that way, but it's like it's back to what you were saying, like you can believe whatever you like whatever you like, but it's just like you're making sure that you're doing it for the right reason. In my sense, it's like, and I feel like that's also um on the fear like the publishing industry and also with creators and readers as well, because they feel like, oh, I'm going to do this because it's like the trending thing at the moment. It's like, no, you should be doing this because you actually want to read it. It's like that's the entire point. It's like don't do it because it's like you think it's just gonna make you look in a positive light. It's like if you don't like it, you don't have to like every Black or every BIPOC person's book, but try to make an effort in a sense, or just like I can go on in this because it's like it's something that I've been really thinking about as of late, because especially like looking through social media in the sense like I'm it just I think we're probably heading it just like with the algorithm and social media and all this stuff, and it's just like I'm worried that people are taking advantage of the situation in that
Mhm.
sense.
I also
I mean,
want
there's,
to,
sorry,
oh,
no, continue.
I also want to piggyback on something you said earlier as well about uh all of all of this money. Publishing is like $1 billion industry. Um, and most publishing houses are located in one of the most expensive cities in America and the
Yes.
world, and the pay is garbage. the
Yeah.
pay the pay is garbage. Like me and Deidre, we don't want to be librarians forever, just to keep it. But and we are doing this not because we want to be like, it would be nice if we got super famous one day, but it's more just we love books and we like the publishing aspect, but conceivably it's just like it's not attainable for two people who live in New York City to make that transition. Because despite like this being a $1 billion industry, like things we would qualify for, like a smooth, like half our current salary, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that in and of itself is gatekeeping or like a barrier
Oh,
for
absolutely.
anyone who's not cis white straight male, because who can conceivably live off that in New York City
Right.
without help or without like that next big thing, you know what I mean? So as people of color, we already make less. Like and making that transition would totally be uh unattainable for us. And that
Writers as well.
ties into the lack of diversity as well, because who can afford it?
Yeah, writers as well. You know, BIPOC writers, very often, and especially I mean, there was I think it was Al McKinney who had the Publishers Paid Me spreadsheet a while ago, and showed that on average, white authors were paid more and maybe like probably publicized more. And so there are a lot of Black writers who are not paid a whole lot for their books. Like I've had exceptionally small advances for some books. Um, and you need to have a day job on top of that, right? But then it's like, can you, that takes a lot of labor because it's like having two full-time jobs. So something's got to give. And if you can't make a lot of money off of your writing and your books, then you might just say, I'm going to give up on this and just write and just stick to my day job. And then you have like, again, like the publishing aficionado who are living in New York and not being paid very much. And I feel sorry for a lot of like, for example, editors, because there's a lot of cuts happening to various departments. And so you have a lot of editors that have to do like what would have been the job of a publicist or what would have been the job of marketer and stuff like that for little pay. At the same time, it's like there are certain people that are able to get into the publishing industry either through connections or because they were able to grow up in a certain socioeconomic with certain socioeconomic privileges, and so they could afford to be interns at a publishing house and not get paid for their labor, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot, I think, that's left over from the early days of publishing, um, in terms of like the idea of who belongs in this space that I think continues on till today that has to be dismantled for there to be any real sustainable change.
No, I feel like we need to have like a panel of our own.
We can do it. We can like
Yeah.
invite folks, just have
No,
a
because that's how we can create a community, because like have this conversation, because we're not gonna solve it. It's gonna take time. Like we have to like not to say like we're never gonna solve it, because I hope that we can have some like resolution, but I feel like it's a conversation that needs to keep happening and keep going so people are aware, because I don't think a lot of people are aware that this is going on, because they just think that writers live on a hot they like James Patterson or something. Like, no, not every writer is James Patterson. Please do not become James Patterson. He is a vein of every, and I don't care if we're recording this, he is a vein of every librarian.
oh my gosh.
His books take up the shelf and we can't read his books because he keeps publishing more. Frustrating. Okay.
But
Fair.
he's quite popular. It's
Yeah.
surprisingly popular in a lot of Sabrina and I mostly serve Black and brown Caribbean, Puerto Rican, or Latino
Mhm.
communities. And they're at least at my former branch, they were very popular
Yeah, they're still very popular. He's
amongst
still
that
very popular.
population.
Yeah.
But then again, it's like it's Alex Cross, one of his most pro well-known books. The main character is a black man. Um, so which I didn't know until I didn't put two and two together until like a few years back, but I loved like the movie versions with Morgan Freeman and all of that. So
Mhm. Um, so back to the Queen's Spade. So I said like what was my favorite scene, like that the big fight scene. What would you say, without giving any spoilers, what would you say was like your the funnest scene that you had to write for the Queen's Spade?
I like that I was able to kind of throw in a little bit of the supernatural in there. So that, like a seance happens. And what's interesting is like it's not a fantasy story, but the Victorian era at the time was very like obsessed with the supernatural. So I wanted to play with that a little bit. Also, when you think about Black cultures as well, a lot of what's considered supernatural and fantasy is actually like reality, like contemporary reality and just normal to our understanding of the world. So I did kind of want to play a little bit with genre to play with the reader's expectation of like, well, what is and isn't fantasy? Like, what do we consider fantasy? What don't we? So there's a little scene in there.
Scene. That was a lot of fun. It kind of I just watched a documentary about with Arthur Conan Doyle, and
Mm.
he was like fascinated with the the supernatural and speculation. Like he loved doing seances. So reading that scene kind of piggyback because during that time it was becoming a thing during Victorian times. So it was like a reflection of that. I was like, oh, that's awesome. I just remember that. That was really cool. Um, well, so after reading The Queen's Spade, like myself, probably want to read more about the real Sarah. But are there any other books that you would recommend to readers for those who want to either read more about Sarah or who want to read something that is similar to like this historical revenge thriller?
Oh, well, I've actually been told that my book is very well, first of all, Count to Monte Cristo is what my book is typically comped with, but I've been told that my book is has like the vibes of Adeline Grace's Belladonna. Um, I think that there's one book that I recently read, Immortal Dark by TJ Skirma. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. That was kind of like it was like it's very like fantasy, but it's about a Black woman, a Black girl who's like trying to get her sister back from this vampire academy. And she's like angry again. Like I think there are definitely a lot of like Black girls not taking any crap um, stories out there. In terms of like learning about Sarah Forbes Panetta, if anybody's interested in nonfiction books, I read a lot from this book called Black Victorians, Black Victoriana, which the opening essay is specifically on Sarah Forbes Bonetta and her daughter Victoria Davies. So, but it goes beyond that to talk more about like what Black people's lives were like in the 19th century. And I learned a lot from it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I gotta look that up. I just looked it up and yeah, I need to see if I can get a copy of that because I always ever since I watched the I don't know if you remember the movie Belle, but
Mm.
yeah, I love that movie. And ever since seeing first, when I found out that this was inspired by a true story, that Dido Elizabeth Bell was a real person,
Yeah.
and that I've been trying to, I was always interested in looking for more Black people in Regency era, and I know there's a book, Black London. I think they did a new reprint of it, but
Hmm.
I have that book and I want to read that. And I've been always interested in not only the little that we know of Dido Elizabeth Bell, but also Black Regency, like Black people in the Regency era. So this one is definitely, this book is Black Victorians, Black Victoriana. That's right up my alley. So I'm definitely gonna look that one up.
Awesome. I'm taking a look at it now. I think, yeah, I think it's edited, maybe edited by the same person. So that's
Yes,
really interesting.
yes, yes, Gretchen, yes, it
Oh, that's so
is.
cool. Okay, I'm definitely gonna buy that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Because they did um I think she did like two books, like Black London, Life Before Emancipation, and then she did another one, Black England, a forgotten Georgian history. So yeah,
Mm.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna pick that one up, Black Victoria, because I don't think it's like, I think Bridgerton, like you said, it has its pros and its cons. But what I really liked about it with Bridgerton is it let people know that yes, Black people did exist during that time. It's not something, it's not like we're just doing it, it was done just to make it diverse. It's like they did exist. And I think I know what for it did for me is like to be more interested in that aspect. And I hope, and I think that it caused people to be more interested in that as well. So
Yeah, yeah.
I,
That's the really great thing about Bridgerton.
yeah.
Not like they need any free press, but I want to say almost a year ago, Hallmark did their spin on Bridgerton, and they did a retelling of Sense and Sensibility,
I
which is
love
my favorite Jane Austen book,
that
uh,
was so
with
good.
a black with the sisters being black.
Mm.
So I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. It was
And
pretty fantastic actually, and the
yeah, and
acting was amazing, and the costumes.
yeah.
I'm like, oh, y'all really put an actual
Hmm.
budget in this.
They did. And then also like the setting, this with the setting, in the houses they would have portraits of Black people in it, like real, because so in the background you could see the portrait of Dido Elizabeth Bell. They had other Black portraits as well, and I think in the music was done by Black composers during the Regency era. So they just like they went all out, and it was so
Yeah.
good.
That's
It yeah, people say it's like, well, it's not accurate depiction. It's like it's never going to be word for word the one thing. Like it's never going to be that. It was entertaining. It was great, and really great acting. It was very
It's
wonderful.
yeah.
So I
You
don't know
would
if you
not
get.
expect that from Hallmark. So
No, you
if you
didn't.
haven't watched it, uh, I highly recommend. I don't know where you can watch. Everybody has an app now, but if you can find it, I highly recommend
what is it called
watching
again?
it. It's just Sense and Sensibility.
Okay, okay,
And it's a Hallmark channel production. And all you
Mhm.
future watchers, definitely check it out.
I'm gonna check that one out definitely.
So before we close out, because and like I said, we can probably talk all day about this. We did want to create to close out like with a little game that we've decided to do this for the first time and for the inaugural like cup of tea author talks that we have here. So we're going to do a bookish version edition of this versus that. So I'm gonna give you two choices. You could choose which one that you prefer. So we can have like our viewers have an idea of like what kind of author that you are. So are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. So paperback or hardback?
Hardback.
Me too.
It's just shiny, like the cover is shiny. Good.
Yeah. And it's easier, even though it's harder to carry around, it lasts longer. And I think
Yeah.
that's the librarian in me, because I'm like, no, the binding is going to last longer. It's going to be in the bag. It's not going to be as beat up as much. Okay, read one book at a time or read multiple books at a time.
Read multiple books at a time. I don't know. It's my attention span. I'm always jumping from one thing to another. It's crazy.
Yes, I am guilty of that. So I'm with you. Yeah. Whitney's like,
That
one
is
book
not my, I am the opposite. I mean, do I currently have like 30 tabs open of books that I read? Yes. But I'm going through each of them, bouncing around because I mostly read like webtoons and stuff. So if I bounce around too much, I'll start to get characters and things jumbled up. So
Yeah.
if I'm like, this character did this. No, that was the other book. And let me, but I'll drop a book in a second if I'm like, yeah. If I'm not feeling it, I'm not gonna lie.
I think, and maybe Sarah, you probably feel the same way. It's like, because I did it in college, I had to read multiple books at a time because I was an English major. So I'm
Yep.
like, well,
Yeah. I was trained to read multiple books at the same time and just
exactly.
having to juggle it. So
Well, and because I was a literature major and I suck at assigned readings, and so
yeah,
like I don't have to do that anymore.
exactly. Yeah. You're like free
I
from
have
it.
to
Unfortunately,
read
I'm free from academia.
multiple books at the same time because no one's grading us on it anymore. Read what I
Exactly.
want at my pace.
You're free.
Exactly. Um, the classics or new releases.
New releases. New releases, and especially like new takes on classics. I would like to see like, because our thinking has evolved since then. So I want to see how people, rework certain things, like you said, Jane Austen, etc., from like a 21st century point of view.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I still like the classics, but I do appreciate the new releases as well. So one POV or two or more POVs.
I have tried two or more POVs, and it's tough to juggle. I'm going to say one. I like being in one head, and it's like I learn more about that person as I go along. So
Yeah. I think I
I
do.
appreciate both. Like,
Yeah, exactly. I think it's because like with the two or more POVs, it has to be done really well. Because not
mm,
a lot of books have you read it and you're like, you should have kept it just one because it seems like you're having a hard time juggling all of them at the same time. A hard copy or an ebook or audiobook.
ooh. I've been loving audiobooks recently just because like on long drives I can listen, and I also realize like there are different ways to read, and it's more accessible that way.
Mhm.
But ultimately I do like having hard copies to at least like put on my shelf because aesthetic wise as well, like like I love like the different covers and like matching the colors together. So I don't know.
I do want to say because I received an advanced copy of the audiobook for the Queen's Spade. The narrator is amazing. She does a wonderful job doing the different voices. When she does Birdie, it's like a nasal kind of like I'm busting out laughing. Like
I Now that's interesting because like I have not actually heard the audiobook yet. and like nobody has told me anything. Like I've talked to the narrator, of course, like when she started, and I was given the opportunity to choose which narrator I wanted. And then after that, I was like, is it finished? Like, is it gonna be done? Like, so I'm definitely, I think I'm gonna buy it, like just straight up buy it and listen to it. And this could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's just so much fun. Just like she captures the voices and everything. It's a wonderful, she does a great job. I thought I heard, I have like a list of narrators that are my favorite, and I thought she was on that list and she wasn't. I was like, well, now you're on it now because like you've done such a great job at it.
Oh, awesome, awesome.
Okay, read in bed or read on the sofa or couch.
Ooh, I'm gonna say read in bed. I just like the comfortableness of it. And I can't read on my sofa unless I have a blanket anyway. So it's like turning your sofa into a bed. So yeah, so read in bed, read in bed.
Yeah, I do like that too. But I have a cat and who's behaving very well. I don't want to jinx it. But yeah, anywhere I go, she just like disrupts the reading. So it's kind of hard to figure out like where to go because she'll just like jump on me. It's like you're supposed to be paying attention to me. Um, the library or a bookstore.
I'm gonna say library. You guys are librarians. And also, you know what? Libraries are sort of like, I think, fighting so hard in terms of like getting books in the hands of people who need them. And I really, really appreciate that, you know? Like when you go into, I appreciate bookstores as well. I absolutely like I love walking to a bookstore and being able to see at least one of my books there makes me feel like so nice. But the thing about librarians, I feel the one thing about bookstores is like when I walk in, it's always like the book talk table first, and it's like the big like Colleen Hoover's in the front and center. And I think like with librarians, I don't know. There's, especially with the kind of librarians we have, there's that passion to get like those lesser known books in people's hands and the books that people need. So I'm really grateful to you guys.
Thank you. Yes, we try because I had to like weed a lot of books a couple of weeks ago because they weren't being checked out, and I'm trying to like push them to people because that's something we're suffering right now. Like people come in for book talk titles
Mhm.
and I'm like, no, there's a long hold list, and they're like, okay, I'll put it on the list, and they just walk out the door. I'm like, no, we have other books, please. Like, check them out, please.
You're fighting the good fight. You're fighting the
Thank
good
you.
fight.
Yes. Whitney blames, not blames me. She says, no, no, because I will sometimes buy a book. And she says, you work in a library. Why are you buying a book? I'm like, because I want to. So, yeah.
Unblur your background, Teresa.
Okay, okay, you know what? So we're gonna go to the next
Unblur
question.
your background.
We're gonna go to the next question.
Receipts, other receipts. The one thing that I will say, you know, bookstores, I bought my own book in Canada. It was like 25 bucks hardcover. And you know, so the one thing about libraries, sometimes like you just want to buy it and you have you know some spare change. But you know what? I think for libraries to make things accessible for people who might not be able to plop down like 30
Yeah,
bucks and whatever for a hardcover, I think that's also very special.
yeah, it is. And um yeah, it definitely is. But there's sometimes just having that, especially if it's like a limited edition, which it seems,
Mhm.
and that's also another conversation. I'm seeing that too much now. These limited edition cover like books because they want you to buy them. Like, well, that's great, but again, it's $30, and that's a lot of money. And speaking of blurring, like blurring stuff, how many K-pop cases you have, Whitney?
But
Look, I don't. The difference is, Tarisha, is like there are no K-pop albums that I don't already or that I haven't already borrowed from the library. So the difference is I can't borrow my K-pop albums from the library. You can borrow most of your books.
It's called Spotify. All
Oh,
right.
it's look, one, I don't pay for I don't have Spotify. I do Apple Music, but you don't own it at the end of the day. Because if I
Oh,
one day I decide that I don't want to pay for Apple Music, or they decide they want to take their music off of that platform, I still have the CD, and plus I also have a car with a CD player in it. So
that's true.
and I still have CDs from before streaming and all that was a thing. So,
Let's
uh,
just bring up a question about like owning versus like services. And I think we're having that conversation in a lot of different, like if you're into
mhm.
video games and anime or like TV, like I use Spotify and I was shocked when one singer that I used to listen to, Nami Muro, just like her music just suddenly disappeared off Spotify. And I was like, wow, I remember a time when I owned music.
Yeah.
So I could like the publisher or whoever, the record label, whoever could just say like, I'm stopping this service, and then suddenly you don't own anything anymore. So it's crazy.
Yeah. It's the same with like ebooks because it was like at a time when even it's still true today, but like the continual rise of ebooks, like Amazon publishers have said, oh, hey, you don't really own the ebooks. You're just buying the license to open the ebook because there was like an issue when Amazon, for some reason, took down Animal Farm or 1984, and they deleted like it disappeared off of a lot of people's Kindles, even though they bought the title, and they were like, yeah, we have the right to do that. So it is something about like ownership of digital items, and we're seeing that with streaming as well because we don't really own it and we're just paying for the service to open it, and it could disappear anytime soon. So Whitney does have a point that she can buy the album, just like I have a point, I could buy the book if I wanted to. So there.
what's the re-listening? What's the rereading value of half your collection, Teresa?
Okay, we're going to the next question.
You know?
The next and final question.
Oh my gosh.
So we have bookmarks or the travesty, the page corner fold.
Oh, bookmarks, definitely. I don't like the ear bunny thing. No,
No.
no. Can't garnish my brain.
Huge dog ear person.
No,
Huge.
oh my God. You have the receipts from the library telling you the due date. That's your bookmark. Like, come on.
I know
I don't,
like I
I'm
get
not
a lot of
gonna tell on
slang.
myself, but Tabrija, do you think I have a receipt? A physical receipt?
We're gonna cut before you get yourself in trouble. Okay. Um, meet your favorite author or meet your favorite character.
I think I'm gonna be brave and say meet my favorite character because I feel like I do know a lot of authors and like obviously there are authors that I would love to meet. That question like who do you like to meet, dead or alive? Like there's quite a few, but I feel like characters, like I don't know what they do. You know what I mean? Like I feel like because I feel like an author would be like civil and stuff like that, but we writers, we write our characters for like we just go for broke. So it's like if you're meeting like a wild character is like, I don't know if this person is going to like greet me or like hold a knife to my throat in a like sexy enemies to lovers way, or what's gonna happen. So it's like, let me meet this character. Let me be brave and meet the character.
So who would be the character that you want to meet?
That, oh gosh, I don't even know. I kind of want to be in Legendborn. I just want to be in Legendborn. I want to be part of the crew. But I don't know. We'll see. I have too many book boyfriends and like see if I can steal them from a few protagonists. Give them a wink and like, I don't know.
Speaking of, you just mentioned it, friends to lovers or enemies to lovers.
I'm gonna actually say friends to lovers because I haven't seen it like as much. I feel like enemies to lovers is like more popular,
Mhm.
but I haven't exactly been like I feel like enemies to lovers can have issues in terms of like how it's done. Like I've often have not been like fully satisfied with it. I'm like the only time that I've been 100% satisfied with enemies to lovers has actually been in a manga series called Basara, where I was like, this is the gold standard for enemies to lovers. But I would like to see something like childhood friends, growing because it's just cute. I don't know. It's cute.
No, I agree. I think um like with Pride and Prejudice, it started the enemies to lovers kind of trope. And people are trying to like, mimic that. So you don't see a lot of, and I'm like, I don't know why I keep like connecting him with Jane Austen with like friends to lovers like Emma, like
Mm,
with Mr. Knightley and Emma. So they you don't see a lot of that. And I think you definitely need to see more of that kind of like dynamic and relationship in romances because it's kind of entertaining to see like how someone starts from friends
hmm
and get together towards the end. Yeah, I agree. You see that a lot. It seems like enemies of lovers or second chance kind of romance. That seems to be
I'm a
the
huge
popular choice.
second chance and romance type
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
Mm.
It's entertaining sometimes. Yeah. Um, read in silence or read with music.
Read in silence. I think I get easily distracted.
I will I could do both, but I do kind of prefer reading with music. It just it has to be classical. It can't be pop or anything like that because I'll get distracted and start dancing. It's like
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I'll just start bopping to the music. I'm like, no, I need to like focus.
series or standalones.
I like series. I like series. I write mostly series, but I do like to be immersed in like once I find a world that I love, I like to be like part of that world for a long time.
And lastly, reading with tea or reading with coffee.
Reading with tea, definitely. I love peppermint tea with honey, and coffee just makes me very jittery and it doesn't really feel great. So definitely tea.
Yay! Same. Well, thank you for that. I hope that was a lot of fun to play. So yeah, we are out of time. This was an amazing conversation to have, Sarah. So thank you so much. Before we close out, do you want to give like a 30-minute like pitch as a book talk of the
30
Queen
seconds.
Spade? 30
30
seconds.
seconds.
30 seconds. I am so sorry.
That I was like, oh, let me
Like
let me
30
get
minutes.
out like my documents. A 30-second pitch of the Queen Spade.
Yes.
Actually, let me read the summary. So it says here, as you can see, I love the book jacket. It's so lovely. Let's actually take a look at that. There you go. That should be like the pitch in and of itself is how pretty the cover is. But a young lady can take only so many injuries before humiliation and insult forge a vow of revenge. The year is 1862, and murderous desires are simmering in England. Sarah Forbes Bonetta, once a princess of the Ibado clan, desires one thing above all else: revenge against the British crown and its system of colonial humanitarianism, which stole her dignity and transformed her into royal property. So taking down the crown means entering into a twisted game of court politics, even if that entails aligning with a dangerous yet alluring, and I would add sexy, crime lord in London's underworld and exploiting the affections of Queen Victoria's own son, Prince Albert. But when Queen Victoria begins to suspect Sally's true intentions, she plays the only card in Victorian society that could possibly cage Sally again: marriage. Loosely inspired by the true story of Sarah Forbes Bonetta, Queen Victoria's African goddaughter, The Queen's Spade is a lush and riveting historical thriller that offers an unflinching gaze into justice and retribution. So, woohoo! So it's a lot of sexy revenge thriller, historical hijinks, and chess master heroines, and pawns, and like people on chessboard. And she's kind of like playing it. And on the other side is Queen Victoria, who has her own like pawns and all the other chess pieces. I don't know what they're called. I think there's like the bishop and blah blah blah. But it's all very like 3D chess. And if you like that kind of thing, then read the Queen's Spade. I was gonna say the Bones of Ruin. Sorry. The last book of the Bones of Ruin just came out last April, so I'm still kind of like slightly in Bones of Ruin promo mode, but I've switched over to Queen's Spade.
No worries. That was great. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you for those who are watching. Please make sure to get the Queen Spade. You can go to the next slide, Whitney. It comes out, I'm sorry, that's yeah, we'll deal with that. It comes out this Tuesday. So it will come out in hardcover and ebook and e-audiobook. It's also will be available in your local library. Make sure to get a copy. It is a wonderful, great start to the 2025 year. It is really a great revenge thriller that I highly recommend. You could go to the next slide. And also get more books by Sarah Raughley. She just said the Bones of Ruin trilogy. The last book came out in April, and then you also had the Fate of Flames trilogy, the Effigies series trilogy. We'll be putting the links in the chat, and also they'll be available on my blog, so you can be able to purchase or borrow them from your library. All these books that we are being shown here. And then join us next month. We will be talking with Celestine Martin. She's a romance author. She will be coming on February 16th at 6 p.m. Talking about her other books and also including her most recent book, Deja Brew. Just kind of love the names of the titles that she comes up with. So if you are looking to celebrate Valentine's Day or just romance altogether, please take the time to join us for that. You'll find the RSVP link also available on my blog. And also, thank you so much, Sarah. This was a really great conversation. And I hope everyone takes the time to Follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Threads, and Bluesky. You can see our handles, and also take the time to follow Sarah. She is also on Instagram, Threads, Bluesky, and also take the time to visit her website. So thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Sarah. This was an amazing conversation, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care,
Thank you
everyone.
guys. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Oh, you're welcome.